Whoever you are, I'm Josh. I hope you're happy and healthy. Today is April 2nd, and these are the books I read in March. Now, yes, there are only two of them. This was a super busy month for me, so I didn't read quite as much as I usually like to, but the two books I did read this month were Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls and The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Now, these are obviously two very different books, but since there are only two of them, I thought I could also, in this video, address the question of, is The Art of War still worth reading today? I feel like we see it referenced a lot now as this Bible for leadership, so I wanted to see if there are insights in this book that are still relevant, or if it just looks good to put it in your LinkedIn profile that you read The Art of War and it made you a better CEO or whatever. So stick around for that, but first let's talk about Where the Red Fern Grows. My grandmother actually lent this to me. I know this is a book that kids used to get assigned for school. A lot of the Goodreads reviews talked about reading it in school, and I would guess it's probably targeted towards an audience of 10 to 13, 14-year-olds. But it still definitely had appeal for me as an adult. It takes place in the Ozark Mountain Valley, and it really savors every detail of that beautiful nature. You can tell the author has a real knowledge of what the landscapes look like around there. Plus, the writing style is just so laid back, so easygoing. We talk about these high-octane thrillers that increase your blood pressure. I think this book lowers your blood pressure reading it. It's just so relaxing. I don't really usually connect with that sentiment of yearning for this rural agrarian America of the past, but seeing it through the eyes of a kid really made it kind of more accessible and much more magical. Now, this book is about Billy, a 14-year-old boy, and the love between him and his two hunting dogs. And I think Rawls' strength is that he communicates that love so universally that you can relate to it even if you can't relate to anything else about the characters' lives. It has the usual payoffs and some heartbreaks. The end was pretty emotional, especially if you're a dog person. I love a period piece, so this early 1900s kind of rural Ozark Valley setting was great for me. The book made me nostalgic, not even for anything in its content, but just for the feeling of reading as a kid, and so for that by itself, I enjoyed it. All right, on to the star of the show. We have The Art of War. This is a very famous book written in the 5th century BC-ish, I think, in China by the military leader Sun Tzu. It's not a long read, but I feel like this isn't the type of book you just kind of grind out in a sitting, so I tried to take it slow with it. I read a chapter a day and kind of finished it slowly. Honestly, I think the thing I enjoyed about this book more than anything was just being able to read verbatim the thoughts of someone who lived 2,500 years ago. Sun Tzu could just be this unknowable historical figure, but today we can sit in our 21st century chair and read these things that he wrote and felt and believed in 5th century BC China and know how people from that era wrote and felt. That is, to me, worth more than any moral or lesson I'm getting out of the book, just that experience. And obviously this is all advice to generals about how to lead an army and what that takes in terms of strategies and character. But I think the question of whether it's worth reading today, especially in terms of leadership advice, which is where I feel like we see it being talked about the most, really depends on what exactly you're trying to get out of it. On the one hand, I think it's definitely insightful when it highlights things like doing your best isn't good enough if you aren't also thinking about the forces outside your control and how they might impact you, or the environment someone's placed in is going to have a bigger effect on an outcome than their innate ability. Little morals like that sound obvious when you say them out loud and are obvious to an extent, but I feel we all have areas of our lives where we can apply those a little bit more or better. I think I do anyway. But if you think the book's going to make you better at leading people, I think you might be in the wrong place. And that, I worry, is what some business leaders might be trying to take away from it. Unsurprisingly, right? The best way to treat the 10 employees at a tech startup is going to be very different from the best way for an ancient Chinese general to treat their troops. And even in broad and general terms, the way some of the morals in this book are phrased. And so, in addition to how kind of cringe it is to see anything in business compared to a general leading an army, I think they're just so different that even by connecting them loosely as a metaphor, you've already led yourself down a pretty unhelpful path of thinking. And I know you might say, yeah, Josh, it's obviously bad to compare apples to oranges. Nobody's actually doing that. And you might be right. I hope that you're right. So on the other hand, if you're like me and it's existentially powerful to you to read the words and thoughts of someone from so long ago, or you want to look through the book and read between the lines kind of, or find a cool turn of phrase in one of his passages that's inspires you to improve your life or something, yes, go for it by all means. And it probably wouldn't take you very long to read. So that's about it for today. These are the 2 books that I read in March. I'm still getting over being sick, as you can hear, but as of tomorrow, I think I'm going to be able to go back to work and back to running, which is awesome. As I always say, I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. I love you, and I'll see you next week.